What is up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. We've made some major progress on our latest system. It finally has saltwater running, and it's only a matter of time before it's fully cycled and full of corals. This system is by far our most ambitious and important system because unlike just about every other system in this building, it's designed for sales and shipping, while all of the others are focused on farming. In this system, we can much more easily organize our website inventory as well as section off tanks for some of the bigger online sales. It can be really challenging to keep everything straight when a single system has to do both aquaculture as well as online sales. It's a breeding ground for confusion, and you can run into problems like, say, a coral that's for sale on the website accidentally gets propagated. Awkward. Having a dedicated system for commerce at least communicates that this coral is for sale and not to be messed with until it's time to send it off. Speaking of sending it off, this system is right next to our new packing station, which is much larger and will hopefully make it so that there's much less walking around to go find corals that are sold. Having just about everything in a single system will greatly cut down on the miles the guys have to walk come packing time. The overall system is a bit over 2,500 gallons. It's always a little tricky when we talk about the volume of large tanks because of the thickness of the glass, and the sizes of the overflow boxes really cut into the calculated volume compared to the actual volume. In practice, it's probably closer to 3,000 gallons. Let's see, we have 5 500-gallon tanks and a single 500-gallon sump. But this system spreads out over 50 feet, and the plumbing alone probably stores 100 gallons. You get the idea. It's pretty big. Over each tank, we've installed 10 Ecotech Radion Pros. That's 50 units in total. These are the Gen 5 version, which is really nice for this application compared to the newer Gen 6s. We have these mounted about 24 inches off the surface of the water, so the added spread of the Gen 6 Radion in this situation hurts its performance. One could argue that even the Gen 4 Radions might be better, but those have not been manufactured for quite some time now, so Gen 5 it is. The number of fixtures and the even spread will make for a very even blanket of light for both coral health as well as photography. In our other systems, we went with a very skeletal and airy installation using their RMS rails. I like the look of it, but it made wire management a little more challenging to make look pretty. Also, when it comes time to do any sort of modification, such as replacing a single fixture or adding fixtures, it takes a little bit more effort than I would like. We decided for this system to build out a hanging canopy that could house all the electronics. These hanging fixtures took us a while to assemble. We wanted each of the Radion lights to mount flush, so we used a tool called a plunge router to carve out 50 cutouts into 3/4 inch plywood. We then used that same router to cut out a small lip for the light to sit down into. I think it came out really nice. We painted the bottom side the flattest black paint that we could find because in the future, Becca's going to be shooting top down into this tank, and I want to neutralize any kind of light scatter off of the underside of the canopy. It's a small detail, but we take photography kind of seriously here. Speaking of, the height of this tank and the height the canopy hangs over the tank was carefully chosen to balance the ease of working in the tank as well as shooting photos. In terms of maintenance and grabbing corals for shipping, we wanted everyone to be able to easily reach in and grab stuff without the need of a step stool, but at the same time tall enough that people can easily look into the tank from the side. As for photography, we wanted to avoid the situation of the lights being too close to the water and burning the back of Becca's neck as she's doing the shooting. She's able to do it fine in a similar light system in the greenhouse, but this one is slightly more roomy. One of the best investments that we've made here is a set of lasers to get everything just bang on straight. They've been super helpful. We lined up these tanks perfectly with tanks on the other side of the building over 100 feet away. I'm really proud of that little detail. As for the canopies themselves, they're painted the same dark gray as the ceiling. The idea was to make them as invisible as possible, but the wood construction leaves just a little bit of room for improvement aesthetically. It's just too rough. In the relative near future, I want to kill two birds with one stone and install a decorative facade using a sound-absorbing material from a local company called Audimute. They make a bunch of different kinds of sound paneling designed for offices and music studios and performance halls, and they can make it look very polished, even like wood or stone. So look better and sound absorbing, sign me up. Moving on, let's talk about plumbing. We had a lot of fun leak testing this thing. There are about 100 different places where there could be catastrophic leaks. We started first with RO water and filled everything up. Surprisingly, there weren't that many leaks. We expected the occasional drip from a union that needed to be tightened down, and there were a few of those. There was only one leak though that was kind of bad, from a bulkhead in the closed loop system. Since the closed loop plumbing is on the bottom of the glass, we had to fully drain the tank, uninstall the bulkhead, and diagnose the problem. In this case, we were lucky. It was a pretty easy fix. The gasket wasn't properly seated, so when it was tightened down, it never really made a seal at all. After all that was checked over, we fired up the system to make sure that the water flowed properly. Now, how sad would we be if this thing didn't drain into the sump for some reason? Luckily, it did. The whole system is powered by a single Ibiz A400, and that pump is an absolute monster. It has a zero problem sending water to all 5 aquariums. At one point, I was thinking maybe I should have done the closed loops with A400s rather than the A200s that are there, but I think that I made the right call. The suction of an A400 in a closed loop would be a straight up hazard. I could definitely see fish and inverts getting caught in it. In the future, I'm curious to try a specialized closed loop pump made by another German company called Pantaray. It looks like a tube that you install into the closed loop configuration, and the special thing about this is that it can oscillate water back and forth. So instead of having a dedicated input and a dedicated output, you have what amounts to 2 outputs, and the pump will cycle back and forth. I've never used any products from Pantaray before, but that particular pump caught my eye. In our overflows, we discovered a pretty cool product called a Maggie Muffler. It's a drain silencer that we put onto our middle drain. That middle drain is set to only receive a trickle of flow, so it acts as both a height setting in the overflow box as well as a secondary backup drain. The problem with leaving it wide open is that even a little bit of flow makes a gurgling noise. This muffler does a really good job of nearly eliminating that noise. You could DIY something to save money, but the price of Schedule 80 fittings, plus the time it would take to make 15 to 20 such DIY mufflers, I just decided to buy these and put them on every single tank. One last thing about plumbing. We finally picked up some safety platforms that go over top of the pipes on the floor between the tanks. While this system was under construction, it was hazards like this that made me not want to have people over at all. There was just too many ways for someone who was unfamiliar with this place to get hurt. And even the plumber has tripped over these pipes. He's the one putting them in, and he's still tripping. But now that we have these platforms in, we're one step closer to having visitors. Nothing is set in stone just yet, but we're playing around with the idea of opening back up for appointments just 1 day per week to start off with. When we make that decision, we're going to make an announcement, but don't hold your breath just yet. Moving on, let's talk about this sump. I am really happy with how this one turned out. The water enters from this main 4-inch drain into this first little box section. This partition is very important for 2 reasons. First, it allows heavy particulates to settle out, and we can siphon those up every so often. Second, it's a small chamber that we can rescue fish and inverts from. You'd be amazed how many small fish end up in the sump. And once they're in a sump that's 500 gallons, they're really no fun to catch. Hopefully, we'll be able to catch it in this small section before it winds up in a filter sock. Speaking of filter socks, we have our 8 socks installed, and they're doing a wonderful job. When we fired up the return pump for the first time, there was a lot of manufacturing junk in the lines from all that Schedule 80 PVC. These socks caught 99.9% of it, and you could count the shavings that made it past on one hand. I kinda wish we went with this design for all the other sumps, but we kind of have this rough idea of how we can retrofit that in. Long-term project, work in progress. I get asked a lot why I don't use a filter roller. Short answer is they are a super new tech that isn't battle tested for commercial applications. Also, most are straight up microscopic in scale. Real quick, look at the flow rate of an Abyss A400. It moves an insane amount of water, and most filter rollers are not about that life. Also, gotta keep in mind that this is a commercial facility. We run filter socks through the laundry on a fairly regular basis, so it's really not that much of a maintenance nightmare to just collect them up, rinse them out, and put them through the washer a couple of times. This system isn't quite done yet, and it won't be done for a little while yet, but there are some next steps that are underway. I've got a protein skimmer here and an 80-watt UV ready to go, but we're waiting on an aluminum work table frame from Alufab here in Ohio. They're the ones that made most of these stands. It's nothing special, but to hold equipment, we kind of need an equipment rack. Go figure. The protein skimmer that we went with is a Reef Octopus 8000 external. We're still waiting on some of the pieces parts of it, like the self-cleaning heads and whatnot. We will probably be getting those before we get the stand anyway, so it's no big deal. We have a bunch of these in service now. We're really comfortable with them. Given their price and performance, they're really good. Down the road, we will be adding a calcium reactor, a Neptune Apex controller, and a Calquaster dosing system to mirror what we have going on in the other two systems here in this new building. Actually, guys, the Calquaster dosing system deserves a video of its own, so I'm going to save the details of that for later. All right, until next time, guys, happy reefing.